It's not always that you get the opportunity to speak to LV Vaidyanathan of PNG. LV, thank you so much for joining in. I believe this is the first time you're having a conversation on camera. Are you nervous?
Not at all.
No,
Thanks, Mangalam. Thanks for coming over. Really appreciate it.
Well, you know, we speak at the throes of the end of the festive season, so to say. Everyone's talking about some sort of gradual recovery, but that oomph not being there in the consumer sentiment, so to say. What is your understanding?
We have obviously seen good lot of value growth, but the volumes have been volumes could have been better than what we had seen over the last 15 years, and that's where the challenge is going to be over the next in the short term and in the medium term. How do you accelerate volume growth and therefore drive overall growth for the business? Right?
So how do you do that?
Look, I think if you go back and look at our strategy, which is what we call as an integrated growth strategy, it starts first with identifying, what's the portfolio in which we are going to play, and we have a portfolio of brands and categories in which performance drives brand choice. The second big choice that we have made is to delight the consumer across 5 vectors of superiority, as we call it: product performance, packaging, communication, retail presence, and value, both consumer and customer value. Third is to have a relentless focus on productivity, right? Because that helps drive investments into both product superiority and into inputs as well. Fourth is to actually future-proof your business, okay, which is what we call as constructive disruption. The last one is, of course, the organization and the culture that you create in each of the teams, right? So that's been our strategy. That strategy has worked very well for us.
Because PNG is a global organization, I'm sure there have been a lot of learnings from other geographies as well. Everyone's talking about the opportunity in India. We've seen China at that cusp a couple of decades ago. We've seen the United States at that about 5 decades ago as well. When that change happened, what were the changes that eventually ensued in the consumer space, and how did companies benefit from that? What was your learning from the global hub?
Look, I mean, while it's easy for us to kind of go back and look at how per capita incomes have moved and then how our categories have moved, I would say that our categories have moved in very different trajectory across. If you look at, I talked Gillette about how that has moved. Gillette is a very interesting one, Mangalam. You and I talked it the last time, and the best way to dimensionalize this is you go to 2011 World Cup. Of the 15 players, I think there were about 3 or 4 of them who actually sported some form of a beard, right? And now if you go back and look at the 2023 World Cup, squad, India squad, you have probably 4 of them who have a clean shaven look, right?
2 of them are your brand ambassadors.
2 of them are brand ambassadors, actually. So but despite that, we've had, again, because of the fact that we've spent a lot of time trying to understand consumers, design propositions which delight them, we've been able to grow consistently. So we designed a proposition called Guard for the Indian consumer. Why did we design it? Because unlike the West, most people don't have access to running water.
Right.
So, and you have a fairly hard stubble, correct? So how do you end up having a great shaving experience was something that we had as a challenge. A decade ago, we designed a product called Guard. We actually, at that point in time, 2 out of 3 consumers essentially used double edge. The blade used to cost about 2 rupees. The razor used to cost about less than 10 rupees. Okay, we launched a product where the razor was 25 rupees, the blade was 10 rupees. So you're talking about 5x in this thing. Today we have one of the largest consumer franchise of Guard alone.
How does the global headquarters view India as an opportunity right now? Since the world is talking about this being the decade of India, etc., is that the way the globe sees it as well? I mean, the global headquarters?
Look, India has always been a strategically important priority for the company, but it's become increasingly important for the company as well, simply because they see the demographics, they see the opportunity, and more importantly, they also see the track record that we've had here in India over the last 3 to 4 decades.
So, how does India increasing in their importance change things for you? Do they give you more money? Do they give you more attention? Do they give you more manpower? How does that happen?
It translates into few things. Number one is designing propositions for India. I took Guard as an example, where the proposition was designed in India for the Indian consumers. So that's one. Second is, of course, it does translate into a lot more resources in understanding the consumers better, in designing the proposition better for the Indian consumer. I mean, we have the global R&D the global R&D head for P&G here in India, just to again understand from the consumers and then see what can we do better with the consumers here, right? And that kind of focus and attention that we've got, and from almost every single leadership team member from the global leadership coming here and visiting and understanding what kind of opportunity exists and what really needs to be true for us to be able to deliver the propositions which delight the consumer here in India.
Are there any categories which are present in globally which make sense to be brought to India right now, given the demographics of the Indian market?
I think we constantly keep evaluating, categories, and keep evaluating their attractiveness from an Indian context standpoint. But we believe that we are there from a strategy standpoint. We have the portfolio of category and brands in which we are present, in which we are making a meaningful difference, in which there is a long runway of growth opportunity here in India.
So let's talk about that long runway itself. Let's start with femcare itself. Rural penetration is just about 35%, urban penetration is still about 62 odd percent. What's the headroom for growth here, the runway, and how fast do you aspire to, increase this penetration and grow here?
One part of it is the users have grown in this thing, right?
Yes.
A woman uses, they need protection over a 4-day period.
Yes.
Correct? Today what we see is, on an average, there are only 5 pads that are used over a 4-day period. Okay? If you compare that with, let's say, China, for example, that's 22. Indonesia has 7x higher than on a per capita basis versus India. Vietnam is close to 10x and femcare is an example on a per capita consumption basis. So that's why if you look at it from a runway standpoint, there is runway both on users, as you pointed out. 1 in every 3rd user in urban India still doesn't use pads. 2 out of every 3 users in rural India still doesn't use pads.
What about the 2 factors that may take users out of this as well? One is the sentiment around environment friendliness. If you were to use 22 times more than what you are currently using, the disposal would be an issue, and safe disposal, eco-friendly disposal. And the second one is the leakage of customers to other forms, say something like a menstrual cup, etc. Are there any eco-friendly sanitary pads which you are working on?
Look, I can't comment on the innovation plans that we have, but sustainability is integrated into our strategy. We want to deliver products which are both superior and are sustainable. On sustainability separately, we are anyway working, because it's not just on product alone, but we need to work the ecosystem as well. Ecosystem of the governments on waste collection, recycling, etc. So that effort is always on, and that has nothing to do with just our products alone, but across, as a responsible corporate citizen, we have to make sure that we continue to contribute to the environment in a meaningful and a tangible manner. On
Gillette itself, you said that the underlying macro trend, while you have 60% market share here, when a person thinks of shaving, they think Gillette. For that, the person has to think of shaving. How has that macro trend impacted volumes or sales in Gillette?
Just to correct you, our shares have actually crossed 70% on Gillette.
I took it from the last conference call that you held with the analysts. So
we just crossed 70 there in the thing. But just to come back on this one, right? Let me take how Gillette, even despite the trends of beard, how Gillette can still play a meaningful role.
Yes.
We've got Fusion, which is part of the portfolio, which we have successfully positioned as a trimming tool. Different beard styles, different things that you can do with Fusion. And that's been extremely successful there. The second is the runway to convert from double edge to systems and then take them further along is still pretty large. Even amongst the guard users, Mark III gives you a much better shaving experience. So the journey of taking consumers either to complement what they're already doing or taking them to better shaving experiences, which delivers better value, is has been on and will continue to be on.
You know, razors and blades as an analogy has been the favorite of B schools across the world. Let me just ask you, since I'm here, what proportion of your revenue is coming from razors? How much of them coming from blades? Because that's the more recurring revenue, so to say.
I actually have never looked at those numbers at all, but I think it's about 30-70 right now. You know, if you look at the systems, 30% of our revenues comes from razors and about 70 comes from the replacements that happen, the handle replacements that happen.
And what would it take for you to actually sponsor the Indian cricket team? Because you do that once and you are inculcating the habit of shaving once again.
Look, I think...
I remember the time when, you would have Rahul Dravid shave in public. I mean...
Look, I think Gillette has been very closely associated with sports for a very long time, right? So it continues to be associated. Even today, we have both Shubman Gill and Shreyas Iyer as part of our brand ambassadors. So
just as we speak, there is a spot available on the Indian team jersey for a team sponsor.
Noted.
All right. You introduced sleep-inducing, products as well. How big do you think is that market, and what's the runway there?
I think again, if you go back and look at the study there, Mangalam, what we have found is there's a large-scale sleep deprivation that most of the consumers basically have. Correct? And that's where we've thought, having a supplement will actually help. We've seen that being extremely successful in Europe when we introduced it. In India, to start with a new category, typically, and our experience has always been this, that it typically takes a little longer. So we are here to create categories and create new habits for a much longer period of time. Correct? We typically give ourselves anywhere between 7 to 10 years to really create and establish a very good habit.
We spoke about men's shaving. We haven't spoken about women's hair removal as well through Venus. That has been one of the big growth vectors for you. For how long does it continue to grow faster than the men's category, and what is the opportunity size there?
Look, our business on Venus has grown by almost 10x in the last 10 years. Okay, and we still think we have a huge runway of growth in that particular segment.
What's your revenue share difference right now between Gillette and Venus, if one was to look at it? I mean, what proportion is it?
Today, I would say Venus accounts for about 10% of our total revenues of Gillette, total Gillette, but it's growing at least 10 points faster than our overall Gillette business. Not just to be clear, our overall Gillette business in itself is growing well, and we're pretty pleased with that. But Venus in particular is actually growing 10 points faster than that. But the runway for growth, again, just if you go back and take a look at, a lot is changing. Consumers are looking for solutions which are not messy, which can be done on the go, and which leave a pain-free smoothness, right? And that's the proposition that the consumers have accepted.
And let's talk about the Oral-B vertical and the appliances vertical. What are you doing to drive penetration in this category, and in that drive up your market share too?
Look, I think Oral-B is the brand of toothbrush which is the most recommended by dentists here in India. Right?
Every oral care company says that theirs is the most recommended brand.
We actually made the claim as well in this thing, right? So that's one, which is making sure that oral hygiene is a priority and consumers have the right set of habits to drive oral hygiene habit.
What is the proportion of power and what is the proportion of normal one?
Power at this point in time is relatively small, but it's the fastest growing segment in our oral care business. We're again very happy with how the new habits are being formed and how the form conversion is actually happening here in India.
The perception of P&G is that of an urban high-end company as against some other competitors that you have, which would be perhaps mass sachetization, sort of highly distributed in rural India sort of positioning that they have. How do you, respond to allegations of those?
I don't know whether it's an allegation or not. Let me just put some facts on the table, right? First of all, if I look at our distribution footprint, P&G brands are available. Our footprint goes right up to almost 6 million stores. Okay. Our direct footprint is more than 2.5 million stores.
Incredible.
Okay. At 2.5 million and at 6 million, I don't think we would be called an urban niche by any stretch of imagination. So rural is a sizable part of our business. In cases like in categories like Vicks, for example, it accounts for almost half of our volumes come from rural. So we are, and if you go back and look at our equity in amongst rural consumers, it's pretty strong among many of our brands.
So the reason why a lot of people don't know about all these things is because a large part of your business is still unlisted. And even in the listed businesses that you have, a global parent has 3 listed companies in India. I'm sure you would see synergies in clubbing all of them and perhaps, giving one listed entity to investors. Have you thought about that?
Actually, we're quite happy with the way we are structured in this thing. I think, from a company standpoint, if I look at all the 4 companies that we have, all the 4 companies have created value for all the stakeholders that we have. The company is quite happy with the arrangement that we have at this point in time.
In the home care and hair care businesses, how has your market share trended over the last few years? Have you gained market share?
Our biggest focus right now is we believe that if you put the focus on category growth through integrated growth strategy, that gets you more sustainable results than getting focused on
just the market share.
I'll take Whisper as an example. Okay, 20 years ago, over 20 years, our Whisper market share has been kind of almost around the same.
Yeah.
Okay, we are the market leaders, and we own a substantial part of the market, and market shares have been around the same. But if you go back and look at what we've accomplished over a 20-year period, we took 12 or 13 years to celebrate getting to 24 crore pad sales in a year. Okay, and from there we've gone from 24 crores to 480 crores, with the market share being almost the same.
So you're just growing the pie as much as you can.
There's so much of runway to grow the pie, right? So that's why we don't sweat too much about where we are on our market share, but we spend a lot of time, and most of our reviews are all focused on, are you executing the strategy well, and is that translating into acceleration of category growth?
Is that?
Yeah.
You have over 1,000 crores of cash on your books as well. Is inorganic a part of your growth strategy? What are your thoughts on that?
We constantly keep looking at the company, global company as such, constantly keeps looking at what are the various ways in which we can continue to grow both organically and inorganically. But I have to be very honest on that one, Mangalam, that I think again, the runway that we have within our existing categories and with our existing brands is pretty large, and the runway to create value is pretty large.
Are you comfortable with where your margins are right now, or do you believe that there is some room for improvement back to the peak levels?
We look at success across revenue growth, across margin expansion,
yes,
and across bottom line growth, right? So at least over the last, call it 5-7 years, we've been able to drive balanced growth on the total business that we have, and we're pretty pleased with where we are headed on both top and bottom line.
Digital, the investments that everyone's talking about in ML, artificial intelligence, how has that helped you, grow or optimize your sales mix and also perhaps take you to a wider base of audience?
Most FMCG, the mantra really is add more distributors and keep. That's what drives up. That's what drives up your presence in the market.
Right.
In India, we work with 30 distributors, and this model has been on for the last 25 years.
Wow.
The industry may be anywhere upwards of 2,000. We have 30 distributors. Okay. All of them have one standardized ERP, okay, and the calls that they make, the data that gets generated from that is a huge source through which we are able to then curate, what kind of SKUs to sell, by store, how to sell them, what kind of promotion bundles to sell at a store level, simply because we have the hardware in place where we have very few distributors, a common ERP, huge amount of data with which we can then, then create very intelligent selling in our total machine.
So up until now, if you could give us a number as to, this is what, in terms of incremental sales or incremental margins, our move towards digital and AI has brought us. Would you be able to?
I would say I would attribute to at least a third of our growth and a third of our product, or even more than a third of our productivity, coming from all the digital tools and all the digital capabilities that we have created.
And you are still a long way from optimizing the overall utilization of this, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we've invested a lot of resources, invested a lot of cutting edge, algorithms into this, and we believe that there is still a long runway of driving both accelerated top line and driving productivity.
What proportion of your products are imported from outside of India, and how many of them are manufactured in India? What are your
Today,
plans
I think,
there?
more than 95% of our business is manufactured here in India. I think the number is closer to 97% of our business, of the sales that we have here in India, are produced in India.
And there's opportunity for you to export from India as well, or you want to make it in India and sell it in India itself?
Yeah, we currently already export from India, right, into different parts of the world. But we are also making India a massive manufacturing hub. If you recall, in about 6 months ago, we talked about an investment of about 2,000 crores for a 100% export-oriented unit for healthcare in Gujarat, right? We believe that that is just a starting point of the kind of things that we can do in India, as manufacturing becomes attractive here in India.
All right, we've spoken a lot of serious business stuff. Let's talk about some fun stuff. What does LV stand for, by the way?
Now, LV actually stands for Lalgudi Viswanathan.
Okay.
Okay, but most people know me as LV. Whether it was college, school, PNG, outside, I don't think anyone knows my actual name at all.
Now we do. A company that you admire outside of PNG would be what?
Look, I admire all our peers here in India, right? I think they have a lot of strength. There's a lot to learn, and we have the humility to learn from our peers.
What comes to your mind when I say quick commerce?
It's from a business standpoint, I think it's been a tremendous change that we have seen on the business, both on the digital commerce side and consumer adoption. Initially, there was a lot of skepticism about the business model on this, but I think the quick commerce players and us as suppliers are also learning on various aspects.
So I believe double digit of your revenues comes in from e-commerce. How much of that would be quick commerce?
Now we are actually starting to see a large part of our digital commerce business coming from quick commerce. I can't share the numbers, but a large part of our digital commerce business comes from quick commerce.
What comes to your mind when I say the PNG of 2030?
PNG of 2030 will continue to be an important FMCG company and a very responsible very responsible one at that.
And if you had to end this conversation with one of the PNG product taglines, what would it be?
The best the consumer can get. It's borrowing from the tagline of Gillette, the best that the man can get.
Incredible. Thank you, LVB. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.